All right, before we start painting, we need to talk about brushes for a second here. All right, so these are my brushes for watercolor and acrylics. I have been painting with these student brushes over here that I mentioned earlier for years now because, again, when I'm working with students, I like to use what I have the students using. You want watercolor brushes that are going to be flexible but still have that snap, okay, where they will still hold their shape and come right back to a point. And if it holds enough pigment and water for what you want to do, then it's fine. You just don't want fraying bristles and you don't want shedding bristles. And so, or not bristles, I guess these are called hairs. Okay, these tougher things are called bristles, but hairs. A step up from that would be the Princeton student set. Okay, I like these. The nicer ones that I do like, the more professional is, oh, I don't have them here. I'll have to find them. The Princeton brand, but the professional set. Okay, and I just ordered a few more of those because I can't find all of my, I don't know what happened to them. My family had a house fire years ago and I lost a lot of my paintings and a lot of my supplies. And I suspect I lost my professional set of brushes in my parents' house fire. But, so I'm excited. They should be coming in a few days. And I can't wait to paint with some really nicer brushes. I also like these brushes by Robert Simmons, the Sapphire, the blue sapphire line of brushes. They're nice as well. But my point is you don't need a whole lot of fancy stuff. What you do not want to do is buy something like this and use it 2 times ever. This was a $40 brush. It was required. I had to get it for a college class. Looking back now, I would have gotten a much less expensive brush, but I got the one on the list because I didn't know any better, and we used this all of 2 times. But I keep it in here because it's just too nice to pack away for good or to get rid of. But I haven't had a reason to need that since. Because this is for when you're painting huge, okay, and you need to cover a large area, and I don't paint huge. My watercolors stay pretty small. But it's the nicest brush I've got, so I keep it here. I've also got my pens. Oh, here it is. Later, for a project, you are going to need a permanent Sharpie marker pen. So I've got, for pen and ink techniques, so I've got some pen and ink there. I've got a pencil, the kneaded eraser I mentioned earlier, and then I do have 3 types of cheap rough bristle brushes, and these will just create a really rough dry brush texture technique when needed. And you can use a bristle brush or a toothbrush for splattering techniques. So you would load something like this and then just run your thumb across the bristles and that will splatter really nicely. Toothbrush works great as well. All right, and that is it. Oh, these little clips, you don't need these, but if I'm using watercolor paper on a board and I don't have tape with me, then the clips will hold the paper down and keep it from blowing away and keep it from warping. All right, and that is it. All right, the fun part, we're gonna play. These are the 2 brushes I use the most. The sizing is not standard, so a size 8 in another brand might be bigger or smaller. So just variety. You just need several until you figure out what size and what brand you like best. I keep a paper towel in my left hand, seems like most of the time, for 2 reasons. One, it's handy when I want to jump in and fix a mistake or create a technique with this. And 2, it keeps this hand busy so that I'm less likely to keep putting my fingers on the paper because you have the salt and oils on your fingers or even just smudges of other paint, and we want to try and keep that off of the surface. The 2 cups of water, the reason I want you to have 2 is 1 is going to be for rinsing your brush and it's going to get very cloudy and tainted pretty quickly, and there will be times when you want to dry that brush off and then you need clear, clean water ready to go. When this gets too muddy and you can't see through it at all, then it's time to go replace that and get clean water. Here we go. I'm going to dirty my nice, bright, clean new palette. Okay, Now, for perfectionists, okay, I want to just make a note here. Painting is messy. Watercolor painting is messy, okay? Let it happen. You'll be okay. The paints are going to run together. Paint's going to splatter, and you will live, okay? Do not try to keep your palette neat and tidy all the time. It's just going to frustrate you to no end. It's not going to work. When you first get your watercolor brushes, they are going to have, they're going to be treated with something, usually a type of gelatin, to hold the bristles neatly in place. What you do not want to be doing is bend the bristles, be playing with them with your finger. To loosen that and get ready to paint, you're just simply going to dip it in the water and then gently, I'll show you what it looks like on my hand, okay? You're going to tap until that sort of that glue or that gelatin sort of loosens up. So you're just going to tap the bottom of the water container so that both brushes get those air bubbles out. Loosen the glue or the gelatin, right? And then scrape the extra water off and you're all set to go. Let's see, I love purple and I love this color purple, so I'm going to start over here. We're going to experiment on the two surfaces here. Now, I'm not going to roll my brush in the paint and then just paint directly on the paper because I don't know. I haven't tested it. I don't know what's going on. I have no way of gauging the control of how much pigment and water is on this brush. So I like to first create a little puddle. Okay, and so I'm just going to drop in some water so you can see that. All right, and then I'm going to roll the wet brush in that, and then see I've got a nice pool of dark purple there. Okay, now I can thin this, make another puddle over here by just adding some more water. Okay, so now I've got two shades of the same hue. All right, let's experiment. I'm gonna dip this in, soak up a lot of paint, and I'm going to just lay that down here. That's pretty much as thick and dark and heavy as you ever want to go with watercolor, because again, you really want to be able to see through it. And then let's try it over here on the computer paper as well. So already you can see how the different papers respond to the paint. That's actually fairly dramatic in explaining the differences here. See how the arches, it spread and blended nicely into the paper, and it's still wet, so I can still work with that. I can still add colors and do different techniques. But isn't that gorgeous how it's laying on there so flat and even? Wow, I miss this stuff. Okay. All right, you see how Canson, it's not quite as flat and even and nice to work with. It is already starting to warp a little bit more. You can see that. And it's pulling a little bit in certain areas. So it's wetter over here, drier over here, which is going to make the edges dry a lot paler than the center, where this arches is going to give you very nice control. And then this computer paper, oh my goodness, okay. Look how bumpy and just awful that looks. That is not going to work for anything. Now let's try another color. Let's do over here. Now on the palette, this orange, well, it looks orange, but it's actually not orange. Now I have already kind of ruined and muddied that color, so that is not very vibrant. Okay, what happened there is I did not rinse the purple out of my brush quite enough, and there is still some purple pigment coming up. So what I needed to do was rinse this completely, then go over and pick up some clean water and roll that, and look at the difference. Oh my goodness. See? Okay, now I can create a puddle of that Indian yellow. And though it looks orange in a puddle there, it's going to dry a lot lighter than that. It's not really orange at all. It's it's a yellow, a very warm yellow, so it is leaning the orange direction. But and I don't even know why I'm messing with this computer paper. That is terrible. Let's just get rid of that. I'm gonna do two blending techniques here so you can see how the papers will act differently. Let's see, if you're doing a sky, let's get some blue. Again, go back to the clean water. So I'm going to get this light blue, and I'm going to blend it with a red. Okay, so again, rinsing in the dirty water first. Now rinsing a second time in the clean water. And let's go to Permanent Rose. That'll be a nice color. It's a very pink red. And I've got a puddle of that ready to go. All right. Now, I'm gonna load my brush. When I refer to loading your brush, that means to really soak up a lot of paint. And I'm going to lay that down there. I'll do it here as well. I'm going to go back and rinse quickly. Just get the excess water off. Roll that in the blue. And I'm going to lay the blue right beside. Okay. And I had that lifted up so you can see how that's blending actually more than I wanted it to. But this is going to again highlight the different ways that the paint reacts with the paper and the pigments as well. Now here's something I nearly forgot about. Certain pigments are more permanent than others. Okay, so Permanent Rose, often the name permanent will be in it to remind you that it will stain. Okay, so you see how those two, I didn't lay the blue down next to the red fast enough, and so there is a definite sharp line between the two, and they didn't bleed together. So that is worth noting, that if I wanted it to blend more, which I was going for, I did want it to blend, using the nicer paper worked. Or let's use a different red that's not so permanent. Okay, if I lay that down here, and then lay the blue beside it, now I can get them to merge and blend together a little bit more, which is what I was going for. Okay, see, and then you won't see that dramatic line between the two colors. The Arches paper is great for doing like sky techniques. Let's watch this. You paint water down first. It's called a wet on wet technique or wet in wet technique. You'll hear it said both ways. So that's just water, slightly dirty because of the purple in there. And then you don't want to see any pooling, but you want to have a nice sheen. Oop, there we go, put it back in the camera. Nice sheen so you can still see that there is water on it. And then, when you drop colors in, look at this cool techniques that you can get. See how those colors are just going to blend and bleed together, and then depending on how you turn the paper, they can do some really cool things. I love doing sky techniques wet on wet, and it just always, no matter what you do, basically it turns out looks pretty cool. Let's try the same thing over here. Lay down a flat wash first. You can see even with the Canson paper, it's hard to get an even flat wash. You have to be a little more careful. And see how the paper is starting to buckle and warp a little bit more. All right, so it's not drying quite as fast either. Right there, so we got about the same amount of water and sheen there. Now I'll lay those colors right beside. All right, And you can see the difference. This is still going to blend and do cool stuff. I'm going to purposely hold it here for a minute to get it to bleed. You can play with that. But again, the end result, these are the same paints. Okay, but on the nicer paper, it holds the vibrant color a lot better than the Canson paper will. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The paints will dry a lot lighter on the paper than they look. Okay, like even when you first lay it down, you're like, I like that color, and you come back 10 minutes later, like, what happened? It got kind of dull. You just have to keep that in mind. Everything's going to dry several shades lighter. Okay, I think we have sufficiently demonstrated the difference in the qualities of paper. I still like the look that this will give on its edges, which is why I'm thinking I'm gonna like the hot press paper. So I need to get some hot press paper. For landscapes and seascapes and stuff, I love what this paper does, but for illustrations, like for example, for the illustration of the turtle, if I had been using Arches paper, I don't think I would have liked it as much. I don't think I would have gotten the same kind of smooth look, and I don't know. I'm glad I didn't use Arches paper for this. However, I wish I'd used Arches paper for this, because I was trying to go for a misty look. I was trying to experiment with getting the colors to bleed and blend better, and I didn't nail it because I was working with less expensive paper, and I wanted these misty, foggy look here that only this kind of paper can really produce. It just doesn't quite do the same thing. All right, so I hope that was helpful and not terribly confusing. And of course, YouTube is your friend. You can find all kinds of amazing, helpful information by searching other watercolor tutorials and artists. And that's where I learn a lot of my techniques, actually.